Kia ora koutou. No Aotearoa ahau, ko Sholto Duncan taku ingoa. Kei te kaimahi ahau I mahi ana, e te puna mātauranga o Aotearoa. A warm welcome to everyone. My name's Sholto and I'm a web archivist at the National Library of New Zealand. This presentation will give you an outline of the process our web archiving team has undertaken in testing and embedding browser tricks into our web archiving program at the National Library of Aotearoa, New Zealand. The National Library's been collecting websites since 1999, and over that time we've archived close to 40,000 websites, as well as conducting semi-annual whole-of-domain harvests since 2008. Our main selective harvesting relates to the following themes of government, politics, Māori, Pacific, community groups, social concerns, music history, arts and culture, sports and recreation, and the environment. We also conduct harvesting around significant events such as elections and major sporting events. Finally, we also conduct rapid response collecting. COVID-19 is a good example, but we've been kept on our toes recently with a number of unplanned events. The main tool we've relied on since 2007 is Web Curator tool, which completes the full workflow from selection, permissions, harvesting, quality reviewing, and eventually archiving. And while we're still able to harvest the majority of websites we select with WebCT, there are certain limitations with the heritage-based crawlers. This includes things like dynamic and multimedia content, especially embedded media such as music and videos. And we also have issues with a number of websites being blocked with anti-bot software such as BitNinja. As well as Web Curator tool, we also use Archivit, mainly for larger crawls of websites that have a lot of multimedia content or are on web building platforms that we're unable to harvest effectively using Web Curator tool. We also use Conifer for similarly dynamic websites, which are relatively small. So despite having Web Curator tool, Archivit, and Conifer in our harvesting tool suite, we still have a number of websites that we are unable to reliably harvest. These include, but are not limited to, web building platforms such as Wix, Squarespace and Shopify, as well as a range of embedded third-party media. We also have issues capturing sites that use web design techniques like infinite scrolling, which have become more and more common in recent years. As with any new web crawling technology, we were very interested when the opportunity came around to test out browser tricks. Being an automated browser-based crawler, it was really appealing, and we had a number of websites that we were keen to test it on straight away. During our testing over the last year or so, we've been using the cloud-based browser tricks. As part of our testing process, we set up a Trello board where we added specific examples of sites and platforms we wanted to test, noted down any bugs or issues we came across, and of course made note of any successes. As well as meeting with the developers early on, we also recorded any enhancements that we would like for future development, as well as some of the harvest issues that still needed to be resolved from our end. I think it's important to note that our testing was very much focused at the practitioner level in ways in which we as web archivists would archive it, would interact with it, and use browser tricks as part of our daily work, and this is likely reflected in our testing process. As mentioned earlier, Wix is one of the platforms that we had issues effectively crawling for some time now, with the main issue being that images are tricky to capture. Overall, throughout our testing with browser tricks, we've had mixed results. We definitely were able to capture some sites that we hadn't previously, but we still noticed issues with other websites tested. In some cases, setting the crawl config to capture one hop out or adjusting the scope of the crawl led to successful results, but we still haven't had a lot of success in adding extra seeds, such as static WAC static, for example. Similar to Wix, Squarespace has also been a tricky platform to capture for some time now. We had a higher success rate crawling Squarespace than we did with Wix during testing, which is very promising. But we also ran into some issues effectively capturing images from certain sites. An example would be images encoded with intrinsic width values, as well as WebP image files, which is still an issue for replay despite often being captured. Also, images that are hosted on images.squarespace.cdn.com and not being harvested, and it's difficult and time-consuming to add these as additional URLs where there are a lot of image files on a website. Shopify is another platform we come across regularly where the Hero Tricks crawler doesn't pick up the images or other content hosted at shopify.com. We haven't conducted a lot of testing with Shopify yet, but early results look promising. We've been able to capture some Shopify sites with Conifer in the past, but as they tend to be larger sites, the manual work involved using Conifer has been quite prohibitive. A good example is the Flying Nun website, which is an iconic music label from New Zealand. This is a large website, around 30 gig, which we hadn't been able to capture for several years, but got a good result using browser tricks. So Sporty is a platform primarily developed and used by sporting clubs and organisations that we've had issues capturing for a long time, mainly in relation to the way the news sections dynamically load. Early testing's also been quite successful with good results in both capture and replay. However, it is noted that the site design that requires loading a group of news posts that can then be resorted by older or newer posts still poses an issue for capture and replay. And unfortunately, a lot of these sites are moving to this design characteristic, as you can see in the slide. Capturing embedded third-party media has traditionally been a major issue for us and many others. Our testing of sites with embedded YouTube and Vimeo videos has been relatively successful, and we were able to capture a reasonably high percentage of videos that we hadn't previously been able to. There are still some videos we are unable to capture and some playback issues, but on the whole we've seen a major improvement, which is great. We haven't conducted a lot of testing with Songkick and Bandcamp yet, but early attempts at capturing embedded content such as music players and touring calendars have been relatively unsuccessful. We're planning to do some more testing with these platforms in the future. So there's plenty of features that we like about browser tricks, despite the obvious fact that we can capture a lot of websites that we were previously unable to, which is a major bonus. The UI is quite clean and it's easy to set up a crawl config and run straight away. One of the features we're really happy with is the ability to watch the crawls live and add exclusion filters within the crawl queues. This is a feature we've had on our wish list for a while now, possibly close to a decade, so it's great to have it implemented and working as we would expect. And as I alluded to earlier, the automated browser crawling means we can now harvest larger sites that would have been too labor intensive to capture with Conifer. The browser profile option's also great. We've had some good success testing this with some social media accounts and other sites where logins are required, including some Substack sites. We've also done some testing around sites that have pop-up windows such as brewery sites, where age checkers need to be filled in. These type of age restriction windows have been quite annoying to capture in the past and often mean that we're unable to archive these sites as there's no way to navigate through to the main website and replay despite the content being captured. As I also mentioned earlier, we've noticed that there are still issues capturing content that uses lazy loading web design. On some sites tested, Browsertrix would load one or two more pages, but often would not get a completed crawl, especially when there were multiple load more pages to capture. We tended to have more success with infinite scrolling, where the extra content loads via scrolling rather than a load more button. And sites using dynamic link loading also seem to be problematic. This seems particularly relevant with Wix sites. In these cases, the live site is loading the content for these links dynamically when clicking on them, which the user is the same behavior as loading the link directly via the address bar. From a Harvest perspective, it's not enough just to capture a subpage using its link. We also need to capture the dynamic version of this. Images encoded with intrinsic width values, as per the example in this slide, are also causing issues with capture and playback. This issue is not confined to Browsertrix, as we've also logged it with Web Curator tool, and it may well be a broader issue for web archiving. So I'd be interested to see if anyone else is finding this. Some features that we would like to see for future development in Browsertrix include being able to add notes and annotations to crawls was high on our wish list and is now enabled in the metadata section of the crawl, which is great. It'd also be useful to be able to add notes to the crawl configs so that we can keep a record of crawl history, especially once crawls have been deleted. From a collaboration perspective, when adding notes to crawls and potentially crawl configs, having a user stamp and perhaps a notification sent to the owner that their crawl has been annotated would also be very useful. We really like the ability to tag crawl configs and crawls, but we couldn't see a way to search and sort crawls by tag, which would be a really useful search parameter. In our harvesting, we often require capturing several URLs to get a complete harvest of a website. So it would be great if we could add multiple primary seeds with different scopes. Adding additional URLs will only pick up that URL and not page links, which is useful in itself, but sometimes we need a deeper crawl of a secondary URL, such as a blog connected to the starting URL. We've done some testing using the custom page prefix option and adding secondary URLs, but the results have been mixed. It would also be great to be able to add inclusions in a similar way to exclusions, both in the crawl config menu and also potentially while the crawl is running. It would be beneficial for us to have some options around scheduling. This could include adding annual to the frequency drop-down list and potentially having a custom schedule option. For recurring schedules, it would be handy to be able to set a start and end date. As I mentioned, we love the queue exclusions menu, and it would be great if this data remained post-crawl to help with harvest analysis and quality review. You can access a lot of this crawl data via the replay tab, but it can be a bit tricky to pull out specific content to analyze. It would also be useful to be able to prune and patch crawls from within the crawl window. Finally, the functionality for integration with other tools would also be a very useful development. A good example would be running a crawl in Browsertrix and having the ability to bring the collection into WebCT for QA and upload to our preservation system. The ability to collaborate and distribute work between archives was also something we had on our wish list, and this has now been enabled. So this diagram gives you a rough idea of the use of different web archiving tools by the library in 2022. While Browsertrix only represented 3% of websites archived, it is likely once testing is finished that this would increase significantly. A lot of the sites we've previously harvested with Conifer are likely to move to Browsertrix, and potentially some of the archivic crawling as well. There's also a number of sites harvested by WebCT that required a lot of post-crawl work that may end up being more efficient to conduct with Browsertrix. And as you can see, this chart outlines how Browsertrix would fit into our web archiving toolbox. WebCT would remain our primary harvesting and content management tool, with Browsertrix being used in cases where WebCT is not effective. As I mentioned, as Browsertrix gets embedded into our workflow, we would likely have less use for both Conifer and Archivit. The ideal scenario would be to have the ability to integrate some of these tools to make the most of their strengths in order to create more complete web archives. So thank you for watching this presentation, and apologies if some of the slides are out of date. I'm recording this a couple of months early, and because Browsertrix is in beta, things are changing quite fast, which is great. And I look forward to having more discussions around Browsertrix at the IIPC panel in May. Ka kite.